wildlife officials making a snake mistake.
A shocking video shows wildlife officers killing dozens of pythons and a pregnant boa constrictor that was legally owned.
They also killed a beloved pet, a boa constrictor, which also happened to be pregnant.
That's the sound of a bolt gun fired into the head of a large reptile.
You're hearing a penetrating bolt gun used to kill pythons with a shot to the head.
This video shows officers with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission killing a pet boa constrictor that was pregnant with up to $100,000 worth of other snakes.
Their moment of shock is captured on camera when they realize what they've done. One of the officers acknowledges that they messed up.
Oh my God, what is wrong with you guys?
So, by now, we all know the story of what happened on April 6th down in Florida. As a matter of fact, most reptile keepers around the world know what happened on that day down in Florida. I was actually in Europe while this story was still fresh, but I still felt compelled to make this video, not to reiterate what happened, I will go into that, but like I'm sure all of you, I want to know, now that it's happened, what's going to happen next? So in this video, I interviewed Daniel Parker from USARK Florida, and we have a conversation not only about what happened, but what is now going to happen next.
I'm Dave Kaufman, and these are my reptile adventures.
So Daniel, thank you so much for meeting with me. This situation is one of the most incredible and strange and devastating situations that I think, our community has faced. What happens now? Where do we go from here as a community?
Well, as my friend and our national USARK president, Phil Goss, has been saying, a lot of times what starts in Florida spreads to other states. So
Right.
wherever you are, you should be concerned about this, because our wildlife officials here brag about setting a precedent for and being innovative and starting things that other states follow. So if this is their kind of innovation, that should scare the lights out of all of us.
So, like I said, what we're going to do is we want to get it out and then, have its head. We'll place its head on the mat and then, go from there.
For us here in Florida, we've got to be politically active. We've got to show up to the FWC meetings. We've got one coming up May 10th and 11th, but we also have to get involved with our state legislators. Our legislators are the ones that make the decisions on how FWC is funded. They allow them to operate as an agency. So even though they're an administrative agency, our legislators have to make that happen by funding them. So we've got to inform our legislators on what's happening with FWC.
And let's talk a little bit about that, because a lot of reptile people around the country don't realize that Florida is the catalyst for everything. If Florida goes down, it's going to create a waterfall effect that is going to affect every reptile keeper in the United States and Canada. And right now, there are trigger laws in effect in, I may get this wrong, but about 17 different states, which means that as soon as Florida adopts these laws, 17 other states will immediately adopt those laws as well. And that is what is going to trigger the waterfall effect that's going to affect every single one of us.
We've seen that states are following what Florida is doing. Georgia has followed it. South Carolina has followed it. North Carolina has tried.
So many people across the world, really. As a matter of fact, a week ago today, I was at the Nijmegen Reptile Expo in Nijmegen in the Netherlands. People from Germany, from Italy, from France, all over Europe came up to me at that expo and said, what is going on in Florida? So this is not something that is contained to Florida. It's not contained to the United States. The entire world is talking about this, and the entire world is concerned about this. So we all know what happened on that day at the facility on April 6th.
How is it possible that you're a captive wildlife inspector and you pull out a boa and can't immediately tell that it's a boa? I mean, in my view, you shouldn't even have that position if you can't immediately identify one of the most common pet snakes, one of the most common pet animals in the trade. Any herper it could see one scale just about and know that was a boa immediately.
Absolutely. And when he did it, he knew immediately that he had screwed up. So the time it took him to go to the enclosure, remove the boa, put the boa on the ground, put the bolt gun to its head, he had plenty of time to identify that boa.
Just throw it in. Just throw it in. The boa's dead.
The what?
The boa. We fucked. The pregnant boa. We messed up.
No. Yeah. No. Oh my God, that guy's gonna flip out. What is wrong with you guys? Who did it?
Yep. Hold on. We're shaking just like you are. Trust me.
Is there a way to maybe save the baby?
Can we save it?
Oh no, dude. This guy's gonna go bananas. Oh my God. Why?
It was a mistake.
It was a mistake.
How? I reminded you 10 times.
Chris. We know.
Chris. Oh my God.
Hey.
No, you don't understand what you guys just did.
It can get fixed.
You can't fix it.
The state's gonna fix it.
You can't
Relax.
fix it. What just happened?
It can get
Relax.
fixed.
You can't fix it. You just killed something that wasn't illegal, and it had about $100,000 worth of fucking babies.
So when Jonathan Wright was told repeatedly that that is a boa, it is legal, do not kill that animal.
This one is not. This is not a retake. This is.
It's a boa.
That's a boa.
He went and did it anyway, called it a mistake. What's actually going to happen to that officer?
We've received notification that these officers are still working in the field doing inspections right now. So if you're in Florida and you're a license holder, these exact officers could still be showing up to your facility to inspect you. So sadly, that's just the situation that we have to live with here. We don't believe FWC has taken this seriously enough. They've been forwarded letters and phone calls from the governor's office for weeks now. So they certainly do know that something's happening, but it hasn't made them change their behavior. If anything, they're buckling down. FWC continued to push whitelist regulations that are going to crack down on Florida's animal industries even more. They've shown no remorse for what they've done. They haven't apologized. They've put out a statement that contains factual misinformation.
Correct.
And they delete comments off social media of people who are critical of them, which should be a violation of the First Amendment. So for there to not even be a time period for investigation and for them to take off some time, not be out in the field to figure out exactly what happened, or if they're even qualified to do this job, FWC doesn't seem to have done any of that. But instead of apologizing and doing things to make it right, it appears that they're clamping down and they are not acknowledging what they did, and that they're going to continue to punish this community. So it's very serious and very scary.
With all the letters that people around the country wrote to Governor DeSantis, what did Governor DeSantis do with those letters?
Well, it appears that the governor's office forwarded them to FWC. And everybody that wrote one of those letters that we've been in touch with got a response from FWC, their form response with their statement on what happened, which we believe contains misinformation, like I said, and then also an email notification that they'd been registered in the FWC system. So the governor's office didn't respond at all. Governor DeSantis made a post on social media a few days later expressing his support for FWC officers.
So all these people wrote to Governor DeSantis. He essentially ignored those letters, those requests for justice, those requests for action. He ignored those and just forwarded them over to FWC. And now FWC is not only punishing us for that, but if you say again, I just want to make sure that I understand this. If you were in Florida and you wrote a letter to Governor DeSantis and that was forwarded to FWC, FWC has now put your name on a watch list. Is that correct?
I don't know if I could call it a watch list, but they've registered you in their system, whatever that means. We've seen the emails. So I know people have read into that and saying I've been put on a watch list. That could be. We just don't know for sure. We don't know what them registering you in the system means. But either way, them knowing who you are and where you where you're at is unnerving to a lot of people here in Florida.
And quite ominous.
The method that they used to kill these snakes was not humane at all. And this is what they used to kill these snakes and make them suffer for up to 45 minutes after the procedure was done.
The way the bolt gun works is what I explained earlier. You know, I'll take this. It has like a powder, you know, that I put in there. Screw it back on. It has a safety. Once I release the safety, then this cylinder, you know, extends out and, you know, humanely euthanizes the animal. And then it's just, you know, it's a push. So you just push down, that's the way it works.
It actually has a charge in it, just like a firearm. And when you press the button, that charge goes off and it sends a metal bolt through the animal's head. But that was all that they did. So they gave it one charge and then threw the snake in a trash can or left it on the floor. And as we can see in the video, some of these snakes were writhing 20 minutes after on the video. And Chris Coffey told us that the snakes were still writhing in the garbage can 45 minutes after having the bolt charge applied to their head.
So I want you guys to consider something. Right now, most of the public outcry about what happened is from the reptile community. But if these were puppies or kittens, the outcry from the public around the world and the amount of people that would descend on Florida to demand justice would be astronomical. So what is the difference between them doing this to these snakes and them doing this to puppies and kittens? So, as hard as it's going to be, close your eyes and listen to this sound. Listen to the sound of these snakes having their lives ended. And imagine, as hard as it is to do, that this was the sound of a puppy or a kitten. And worse, imagine then that the officers actually asked you to help hold down your beloved pet while they drove a spike through its head. Close your eyes and listen to this and imagine.
Clear. 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 Uh-oh. That one might have had a jam. Huh? That one might have had a jam. Uh-oh.
Now ask yourself, what is the difference between puppies and kittens and these snakes? They're beloved pets.
Like you said, we think you're doing the right thing. And yeah, I mean, if you need to walk outside, you know, do what you got to do.
People love them just as much as we love our dogs and cats. Ask yourself, what's the difference between these snakes and a puppy or a kitten? Now look what happens when the gun malfunctions. The officer still tries to use the gun on the snake's head by smashing the gun into the snake's head repeatedly.
It's in.
Then he fumbles with the gun, puts it back against this poor snake's head, and continues to smash it against the snake's head. Can you imagine what that poor snake is feeling? Feeling that gun smash into his head repeatedly while he's waiting to die.
Might have been a bad cartridge.
So it's very disturbing. And what FWC's own field procedure for euthanizing wild pythons is a bolt gun charge followed by pithing, which is destroying the brain with a sharp
the animal
object.
doesn't suffer.
And I've had python contractors with the state. These are people that are paid to work in the field and sadly kill pythons. But they've told me that they would have been fired if they used this procedure that the FWC officers used. And not just that, veterinarians have told us now, this is a procedure, even the field procedure that FWC recommends should not have been used with captive animals. The proper procedure for euthanizing a captive animal that is a pet is chemical anesthesia, so the animal is not uncomfortable. And what we saw in this video was that these animals that are tame animals, they're raised in captivity. Chris Coffey considered these as pets, And some of you who've seen the body cam footage will see that the officers were calling them his pets.
Correct.
You still love them like a member of your family, and Chris
100%.
Coffey considered these pets. So for them to treat captive animals that were healthy animals like this and not even give them the humane death that they just deserved is just incredibly disturbing.
Because who's next? I've done most of them.
I know.
No, I got it. I got it.
What happens now? What does the future look like with this situation? And what does the future look like with Florida? I would like to think, and maybe I'm just being too pie in the sky about this, but I would like to think that this would be a catalyst that would finally get Fish and Wildlife and reptile keepers together to start a brand new dialogue and to start working together instead of working against each other.
Well, like I said, FWC's immediate response was to continue pushing their whitelist and a system that's unenforceable. Their own law enforcement has said it would be unenforceable.
Right.
So in our view, this is going to lead to the deaths of more animals. So I hate to be so negative about this, but with FWC, they're just going to have to be dragged kicking and screaming. And we have to bring attention to this. And we also have to hold them to account legally. So a lot of people have asked, well, why don't you sue them? Well, USARK Florida has been in a lawsuit over these regulations for almost 2 years now. And we filed a motion for summary judgment against FWC recently. So we are suing them. And I know that Chris Coffey and Bill McAdam individually are looking to take some legal action on their part.
That was going to be my next
also.
question. Yes. I'm
Yes.
glad that they're doing that.
If FWC is not going to work with us, which in the near term, it certainly looks like that's the way they're behaving, we're going to have to sue them. Now, here's the problem with that. Everybody makes it sound like it's so easy. This costs a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Our current lawsuit with FWC is coming up on $1 million in legal bills.
And that's why it is so important to support not only USARK, but USARK Florida as well. USARK Florida is the ones on the front line who are going to fight these laws, these draconian laws, and they are going to save our industry with our help. How soon is Fish and Wildlife going to enact this whitelist, and is it constitutional for them to do so?
One of the members of the TAG committee, who's a representative for Pet Advocacy Network, brought up that it would be a violation of the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, of the U.S. Constitution. So there is that. But one of the parts of our lawsuit is that we are saying that FWC lacks the constitutional authority to regulate captive animals, animals under human care. Our Florida state constitution gives FWC authority over wild animal life. And we are saying that the animals that we have are not wild animals. These are animals under human care. It's agriculture. What we're doing is no different than what a fish farmer is doing or what even a cow farmer is doing. We would be better regulated by another agency, like perhaps Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. But FWC has demonstrated clearly that they can't handle this responsibility. They're failing in regulating us fairly. And we don't deserve this. Our animals don't deserve this. We worked with them for many years. So now we have to take other measures, whether those are legal measures or otherwise. So that's where we're at right now with FWC.
So I know not a lot, but a number of ball python breeders that don't list their company as an LLC. They list their company as a farm, and therefore they are controlled by the agriculture departments. Is that an avenue that we should be looking at with our with our businesses? Don't list them as an LLC, list them as a farm, and therefore Fish and Wildlife can't touch that. It has to be agriculture that now deals with us.
Well, the issue in Florida is that to sell reptiles or display reptiles, you have to have a license through FWC. So the Constitution and statute gives our Department of Agriculture authority over aquaculture. And that comes from a statute passed in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, some of our herps, turtles, crocodilians, and amphibians are governed by FDACS, Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. So for those breeders in Florida, they can just go with FDACS. But as of right now in Florida, if you breed terrestrial reptiles like snakes, lizards, tortoises, you have to have a license through FWC. So I wish I could tell you to just not do it, but you have to. Otherwise, they're going to literally haul you to jail. And right now, they've made so many new regulations in the past year that if you get a violation, you can lose your license. But not only that, when you lose your license, you forfeit your animals that were possessed over that license. It's a very distressing situation that we're in right now.
So these laws have essentially turned hardworking American citizens into common criminals.
Yes. I mean, it's hard to say otherwise. In the stroke of a vote by some commissioners that weren't informed on what they were voting on, they're mostly real estate developers, if you have to know what their background is. That's who's in charge of our Wildlife Commission. Through an uninformed vote, they voted away this guy's rights to his own business, his own personal property, and they came in and seized that property, but still made him take care of it. So he had to feed snakes that FWC says they owned for 14 months before they came in and killed them. And that's happening in the United States of America.
Well, the good part about that is that we, the people, have a voice, and our voice is going to be heard. So for all the people out there watching this right now that is asking, what happens next? What do we do now? What do we say to them?
You've contacted our governor. That's great. We need to be contacting our state legislators. So especially if you're in Florida, you need to contact your state senator, your state representative. Tell them about what's going on with FWC and that you're a voting citizen and this matters to you. And then you need to show up to public meetings. We have an FWC meeting coming up May 10th and 11th. That's your opportunity to speak directly to the commissioners.
So just to recap here for a second, instead of taking these officers' gruesome mistakes and gross negligence and doing what should be done and either asking for a resignation from these officers or flat out firing them, nothing is happening to them. And Fish and Wildlife is now digging in their heels and going on the attack. And it seems to me like they are going to attack us, their critics, in order to silence us. And that's how they're going to deal with this situation. Is that pretty accurate?
That seems to be what's happening. But I should point out that, yes, I think that the officers' behavior has to be taken into account, but they made it very clear over and over. They had orders from Tallahassee. This was coming from up above. So we should be careful to completely blame the officers. I mean, they've taken a lot of heat and they are at fault for things that happen. But if you've watched some of these body cam videos, you also can kind of hear whether they're playing to the camera or not, I don't know, but they seemed uncomfortable with what they were doing. They didn't seem happy to be doing what they were doing. Who is making these orders? Who is causing this to happen? There's somebody above them that is ordering these things, and we don't know exactly who that is, but we do know it likely went through the executive director, which right now it's an acting director, Thomas Eason, and top law enforcement officials at FWC. So we don't know who made that call. We are trying to find that out. They're being very secretive.
Of course
they are. We think that those people in Tallahassee who are pushing these policies and pushing law enforcement actions like this, killing animals, need to be held to account just as much or more so than the officers, which are the boots on the ground.
This is a very tough time for reptile keepers right now. But what we have going for us is that we do have a voice as Americans, and we can counter this. Their voice is not the be-all, end-all voice here. And it doesn't necessarily mean that ours is either. But it's my hope that there's got to be some common ground that is found because we as reptile keepers aren't going away, and Fish and Wildlife have a job to do. Somewhere in between that, there needs to be a common ground and there needs to be a balance. And I hope that that's where we eventually get to in the future. And at the end of the day, the worst thing that can happen out of this situation is that it's swept under the carpet and forgot about. We can never forget about what happened on that day. And we have to work together as a community to ensure that it never happens again. But it can never be forgotten about. We have to keep talking about it. We have to keep this discussion going, because when something like this happens, it has a shelf life of a week or two or whatever, and then it just disappears because something else comes along to grab our attention. We need to be talking about this in August. We need to be talking about this in October. We need to be talking about this still a year from now. We cannot let what happened just completely disappear and be swept under the carpet.
Absolutely. And that's what FWC wants to happen. They're hoping this will just fade away. But yeah, we're not letting it fade away. We're going to keep reminding them, and we're going to keep pushing for change.
Fantastic. Daniel, thank you so much for this interview. You've shed a lot of light and given us some really good insight into not only what happened, but what's going to happen next. And it's going to be a fight.
Absolutely. And, I've watched your videos in the past, and we've kind of known each other online for many, many years. I wish that we could just be talking about herping or something fun. Those
are the types of videos that I like to make. I don't like making these types of videos, but when something like this happens, I have to.
So, to be honest, I wasn't going to make a video about this, because this isn't the type of videos that I like to make. But the more that I learned about this situation, and then learned about how the authorities were dealing with this situation, I felt very compelled to make this video, not only to show what happened, but more importantly, to talk about what happens next and what we as a community can do to learn from this, to grow from this, to fight this from ever happening again. And that's why I felt that it was important for me to make this video. I'm going to list all of the links to USARK and USARK Florida in the description below. If you can give $5, $100 or more, please consider doing that. Again, if Florida falls, the entire reptile industry across North America falls with it. It is that simple, and it is that serious. So yes, there is a lot of work, and there is a lot of things that we can do, not only as reptile lovers, but as citizens of this country, to fight these draconian laws. So I implore you, get involved, get active, quit writing letters. The politicians don't care about that. Get involved and donate as much as you can to these organizations that are fighting for our rights. And until the next reptile adventure, love the planet, feed your reptile obsession, and rattle on.